Good evening. It's Saturday. Don't even know what time it is. Really don't care. It is 8:30. Down here in Northwest Washington on the Great Olympic Peninsula. I got Big Mike and Lance over here playing some Fortnite. So you might hear some rambling and some gibberish come from over there. Got Larry here. JR, he's in laying down taking a nap. We had the blue and gold scrimmage game last night up in Forks. That's where the varsity JV and C squad boys get their game on. It was pretty exciting. Got to see old Big Mike out there and Jared and some of the other boys down here. A lot of skill out here on the Olympic Peninsula when it comes to football and basketball and baseball. But anyways, I kind of wanted to tune in and give a story, and I think the story that I'm going to give tonight is about a bear that tried to eat me. So here a couple years ago, me and my hunting buddy Gary and I were out here on the Olympic Peninsula in pursuit of Roosevelt elk in early September. And my dad remarried, and when he remarried, I got some stepbrothers and some stepsisters. I need to put some light or some batteries in that smoke alarm here soon. But anyways, being a volunteer firefighter, that kind of it makes me think about fires. But so Daniel, which is one of my stepbrothers, wanted to come over and do some hunting. He got a blacktail tag, and he also got a Roosevelt tag. Well, when he came over, he brought a friend with him named Tyler, and we had all gotten together and hunted, and Daniel successfully tagged out on a beautiful blacktail buck. I believe it was the first one that he's ever shot with his bow. Then he ended up getting called back to work. So when he had left, his friend Tyler had asked if he could stay to hunt, and he said he didn't really care if he had killed anything. He just wanted to be a part of the hunt, see how we did it, seeing what it was all about, you know. And Gary and I were very kind people, very unjudgmental, so we didn't have any, objections to it at all. So he ended up staying because he drove his own rig out. Well, elk season had started at this point, because at first when Daniel was here in pursuit of blacktails, it wasn't quite opening day for elk season. So anyways, elk season had started. Gary and I had talked the night before about what we were going to do to supplement to what our game plan was going to be for that morning hunt that night prior. And that morning we had met up with Tyler, and we had drove out to what we call the Promised Lands, and we had parked and we were getting geared up, and I basically told Tyler what Gary and I had drawn up for what we were going to do, and it indicated it was both of us were going to split up. And I asked Tyler that he had the option of who he wanted to go with. I told Tyler what I was going to do. I told him what Gary was going to do, and he said that he wouldn't mind going with me. So we had all traveled in a pair, or in a group, about 3 miles behind the gate, and then the road split, and we ended up, Tyler and I went one way, and Gary went the other way. Well, it was probably around 11 o'clock that morning, and it was our third setup. And what I mean by setup is, we like to get to a spot where we could do some calling and possibly have a chance of locating a bull, or if not, having one close enough to where it'll come to us. And in the right towards the end of this setup, I was down on my knees, and I had my bow was hanging in the tree, and my release was off on the ground. Which a release, if you're not familiar with a release is what you put on your hand to connect to your bowstring to pull your bow back. It was all off. I was more prepared to call something in for Tyler, to see him shoot his first Roosevelt elk. Because to me, that's what hunting's all about. It's not only you being the one that takes a trophy, and I mean trophy is any size animal, but that's one thing that I love to see and be a part of. So right towards the end of the setup, the hamster in my head was spinning, and I was thinking, man, we need to move, because I knew where Gary was going to be, and where I needed to be, and we kind of had an idea of a plan or a game plan of when we needed to meet up that afternoon. So I ended up giving one more bugle off my Mac Daddy, hashtag not sponsored by Mac Daddy, but I gave one more bugle off my bugle, and I slapped the cap on it, and I spun it around my back, and no seconds after I did that, and when we're set up, we always set up with the wind in our face, and that's when I heard him coming behind me, and what I heard was it sounded like a grizzly bear. It was the and I'd spun around, and I just seen a glimpse of black, and then I spun back and looked at Tyler, and Tyler was just to my right about 15 feet, and I whispered, Tyler, grab your bow, there's a bear coming. And I'd spun back around, and when I looked over my shoulder, that's when he come around this fir tree, and that's when I realized what was taking place, because all my senses had come full circle. I realized that he's coming downwind. I seen the size of the bear, and knew that something I needed to act fast, and I ended up grabbing my release, putting it on. I had stood up, grabbed my bow off the branch it was on, and had taken an arrow out of my quiver, put it on my bow, and as I spun around, I got to full draw. And as I got to full draw, I need to shave my eyebrows, but as I got to full draw, I whispered out, how far is that, Tyler? And Tyler said, I think 20. And about the time that he said 20, that bear started walking at me. And I had placed my 20-yard pin on the tip of his nose and my 30-yard pin on the bottom of his belly. And I let that arrow eat. I seen my arrow disappear, and both of his front legs come forward, and he coughed out a blood clot, and he had spun around and ran back around that tree that he come around when I had seen him. And I didn't see him after that, because the way that the trees were growing in the forest. And Tyler ripped out, holy smokes, he's got a rooster tail of blood coming out of his back. So at that moment I knew, what I had got a clear pass through on this big bear. That's when it all sunk in. I had dropped to my knees, I dropped my bow. I became overwhelmed. I went to a spiritual level that was just, it knocked me off my feet. And this was my second spiritual awakening. I feel like that was a test. That when this had happened, I was at my first go in recovery. I can honestly sit here and tell you guys right now that if I would not have been in recovery, I don't think I would be sitting here telling you this story right now, because of the simple fact that I had to hold my composure. I had to make that one shot count, because I didn't have a sidearm. All I had was a bow and arrow. And like I told Tyler that, the first words that come out of my mouth is I told Tyler, I said, I don't think you realize what I had just shot. And Tyler's like, what do you mean? And I said, I think I just killed the biggest bear in Washington State. And he's like, you're kidding. I said, no, this thing had a head on him that big around. And I told Tyler that I don't think you realize what was just taking place. You know, I had told him, you know, the wind is blowing in our face. He come in downwind from us. And this was a predatory and territorial bear. The way that he had came in, we had just seconds. I probably had about 3 seconds before he would have mauled me, and then Tyler would have had about 4 to 5 seconds before it would have mauled him. I saved not only my life, but I saved Tyler's life too. After about 10 minutes of sitting there and letting it all soak in, you know, I had told Tyler today, I said, I had grabbed my backpack, threw it on, and told Tyler, let's go over and go see if we can't find that arrow. And we had walked over to where the bear was at. And it was moments away from when I touched that arrow off, it was moments away from when he was going to strike. And what I mean by strike was it was going to take from that walking position at me to the charge. And we had walked over to where he had been walking at me, and about 5 feet behind where I'd stopped him, and you could see in the dirt where he had put his brakes on from the impact of my arrow. I had picked the arrow up off the ground. It was saturated in blood. Told Tyler that this is good blood. Stuck the arrow back in my quiver, and we proceeded to follow the way that he had went, because there wasn't blood right off the bat. I honestly, we didn't find blood till about 10-15 feet from where I had stopped him with my arrow, and this was a blood trail I have never seen before. You know, I have shot a lot of animals with my bow, and I've been a part of people shooting stuff with their bow and been on blood trails, and this was one that I'll never forget. The way that, you know, it was, all the trees were just saturated in blood, because I mean he was just squirting out of his back like a rooster tail, like Tyler had said, and the way that he had lost all bodily functions, he was squirting organberry poo all over the fir trees, and when he was hitting it would hit one fir tree, and then it would spray, and it would hit the next trees behind them. Had some pressure. We had followed it for about 80 yards in this flat, and then it had dropped down, and it went into the nastiest stuff on this Olympic Peninsula. When I say nasty, I mean nothing goes in there but to die, you know. What's up, Lance? Do you got anything to say?
Subscribe.
So nasty. We had got to that point where we went from wide open timber to the nastiest dog hair on this planet, and I had laid my bow down, I'd taken my pack off. That's when I looked at Tyler and I said, well, this is what separates the boys from the men. And Tyler looked at me and he goes, what do you mean? I reached into my pocket and I flipped out my 2-inch blade pocket knife and said, well, I got to go in on this blood trail after the biggest bear I've ever seen that I just shot with my bow and arrow with nothing but this pocket knife. And Tyler looked right at me and he goes, you are effing crazy. And I just said, well, what's a boy do? That's when I had got down on my hands and knees, because like I'm telling you, I could not walk through this stuff because it is so brushy. I got down on my hands and knees and I started crawling. This is where it got real spiritual. You know, as I'm crawling, I mean, I'm just getting blood on my face, blood on my clothes. I had got back in there about probably 30-40 feet roughly, and that's when I heard him. I could hear him gurgling. And I had laid down on my belly and I stuck that knife out in front of me. And I remember thinking to myself, all right, this is all that I have between me and you, is this 2-inch blade of steel. And if you come my way, this is all I got to defend myself with. And I had sat there for what seemed like forever, but it was probably only about 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds. And it went dead quiet. Um, the hamster in my head really started spinning. I thought, oh no, did he move? Did he die? Um, the only thing that I could fester up to do was to bark like a dog as loud as I could, and I gave out the biggest woof ever, and there was nothing. It was dead quiet. I thought, all right, he died, and that's when I picked myself back up and started crawling again. And when I mean crawling, I had two knees, both my knees were on the ground, and one hand out, and then I had the knife, so I was really three-legging it. And I had only went about 10 feet, and the brush was so thick. I had my hat on, and I had branches. Some brush went over the bill of my hat, and knocked my hat down. And as it did that, I took my left hand that didn't have the knife in it, and had pushed the bill of my hat up so I could see as I lunged forward. And as I lunged forward, this is no joke, I fell right into the lap of this bear. Like, I had bear balls in my face. I panicked, I tried to backpedal, but the brush was so thick that I couldn't get much separation. And that's when it dawned on me, I seen the way that he was, and I was like, he's dead. He was laying on his back. He had his right paw on his chest where I'd shot him with that arrow. His mouth was open and his tongue was hanging out. It was an amazing sight to see, pretty emotional, because of the simple fact that I know what he had on his mind, and to make that one shot count with a bow and arrow is absolutely amazing. There's a lot of people that I believe would have crumbled in a position like that, and I've always thought and said that the strong stay cool, calm, and collective under any circumstance, and that right there, I owe that to God. I owe that to my sobriety. Focused, clear mind, no fog, no wet brain or anything like that. It was either me or him, and I met the match, and I had conquered it. From that moment, it had changed my life, and it has changed my life forever. I think that it helps me appreciate a lot more things in life, the little things, because for some, I shouldn't be here. I really shouldn't, or maybe I should, I don't know. But anyway, so the story still goes on. I had whooped at Tyler, told him that I had found him. Get in here, you need to look at this bear. Tyler he had come into that brush. We had both high-fived. Tyler was like, holy smokes, I didn't realize how big this bear was. That's when he asked me, well, what do I want to do with it? I told him, I don't know. I was shaking like a dog trying to poop a peach seed. And I said, let's go get Gary, So we had hiked about 3.5 miles probably, to where Gary was at. If we would have went the way that a crow flies, it would probably only been about a mile and a half, but it would have been through some treacherous ground around here on the Olympus Peninsula. So we had made our way over to Gary and touched base with Gary, and I, told him what had happened, explained the story as we were coming back, and we had got to him and and we had made it back there, and Gary was pretty, flabbergasted of the caliber of the bear and how it unfolded, and to shoot it with a bow and arrow. Gary asked me, he's like, you want me to, what do you want to do with it? And I said, I don't know, but I said, I can't even run a knife right now. And he goes, oh, I totally understand. Like he said, he's been in that same position, So what ended up happening was he caped it out, and it was caped out for a shoulder mount. We had taken the cape off, put it on my pack board. We had cut off both back feet, took both hind quarters, both front shoulders, both back straps, and we had left the rest. And we took off. It's honestly hard to say the exact weight of this bear. You know, I wish we could have got it out whole. Um, but with between my pack, Tyler's pack, and Gary's pack, we had well over 350 pounds of meat and hide, and we left a lot of hide. We left bone, we left guts. So, you know, your guess is as good as mine of how much the bear weighed. You know, like I say, it's an absolute blessing that you would have too. Lance is savage. It's an absolute blessing that I'm here. You know, it brought me to a whole new spiritual level of life. Like I said, we got a fire going here right now. I'm ready to make some more good medicine in that bag right there. I am unthawing out that bear. I'm going to get the claws out. I'm going to make a necklace with the front claws. With the hide, I'm not going to do a mount. What I'm going to do is try to see how many drums I can make out of it. And I guess the story goes that your first drum that you make, you have to gift it to somebody. I have somebody in mind who I'm going to gift this one of the drums that I make out of it. So I'd like to get that started as soon as I can. I got a friend down here that said that he'll help me with it. So I'm real eager to get that project going. You know, I had taken the back paws from that bear and had made a necklace for Papa Lair and gifted it to him. You know, good medicine. Also, it's his protector. You know, and he looks good wearing it. It absolutely fits Papa Lair perfect. You know, and I'm excited to get this project rolling along with making the drums. I'm gonna probably start doing that on my free time. Hopefully this will be unthawed by tomorrow when I get off work and I could get to work on the claws for the necklace. Yeah. The other spiritual awakening story also comes with a bear. That'll be a different story. That one you won't want to miss out on that one. That one was pretty good. It was my first one. You know, it was breathtaking. It was a real eye opener. You know, it makes me really appreciate life and God's green earth and what, you know, walking the well road of recovery has to offer to you. You know. But I think right now I'm gonna split. I only got a few more minutes on my memory here to record anyways. I've been rambling on for 23 minutes. Yeah. Always remember, do what makes you happy. Don't worry about what other people think or say about you, because in the end it doesn't matter. You matter. With that, I'm out.